Hello. In the Crown of Aragon, 639 years ago, it was May 8th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Molt Cara Compagnona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Today's document is from one of Joan's commune registers, and these are the registers that are probably the least personal of all the different categories of register. And I'm starting to really understand the probata information, and that makes it even more like we can conclude that a lot of the stuff in this commune register, Joan hardly had any awareness of at all. First, because there might just be too much humdrum routine stuff that doesn't really need to be, put into the, time of the sovereign's busy day. But also, it's a lot of administrative things that really were not the stuff that Joan had to make decisions about because it was just sort of obvious, like today's, for example. So today's document is super short, and it is in Latin, but I got a lot of very helpful assistance from the large language models, and so I've got a really good idea of what this document is about. It's also one that is evenly split at the bottom of folio 131V, and then it continues at the top of folio 132R. The addressee is basically a big old category of officials in Roussillon and Cerdagne, and then specifically in the city of Perpignan. And the probata, I do believe I fully understand it. It's a short probata. So, the first line of the probata is Ferranus Ponte ex pro. And then the second line is Factum per vicem. It's an abbreviation, VIC, and then there's an abbreviation mark, and I think that really abbreviates something very long, which is, oh gosh, how would you even say it in Latin? The pronunciation's a little bit hard. Vice Cancellarium, the Vice Chancellor. And I probably said that wrong in Latin, but all right, so what does it mean? The two lines are Fernan Ponte, and then, oh gosh, after that we have the stock phrase that I found in the book from Cerdagne and Aragon, from the provision made by the Vice Chancellor. Now, in the last line of the text block, we can see the Roman numeral for 80, LXXX, that's 50 plus 3 tens, and then the spelled out number septimo, so we've got 87. And then, of course, at the end of the line above that, we've got M for mille, and we've got 3 C's for 300, so 1387. Then after septimo, for 7, we have really clearly the name Franciscus Sacoste. And that person is listed in the book by Trenx, Cerdagne, and Aragon as Joan's first vice-chancellor. So the name at the end of the document matches the message in the probata. So we can trace the construction of this document. That Joan's vice-chancellor has composed this document and put his name at the end of it, and the notarial scribe who's working to enter this into the archival record, his name is Ferran Ponte, and he is attesting to the veracity of his copy, which he got from the vice-chancellor. So even though the first word of this letter is Johannes etc., which is the name of the king, the name of the king here is being used as an instrument of the state, and it's not literally written by him. It is possible that Joan was aware of this situation described in this letter, but it is not guaranteed. And my guess would be that there's plenty of documents just like this that Joan never even heard of and are recorded in this register. Maybe Joan might have heard about each of them, maybe, but some of them would have had to have been just like a quick mention, like the rundown. Like maybe Joan at the end of the day or at the beginning of the next day gets a report from the vice-chancellor. These were the issues that I handled. And maybe the officials work together and it's the vice-chancellor who does the writing up of the document, or so forth, or maybe even the drafting of the document is done by the scribe for certain issues and the vice-chancellor just approves it and puts his name on it. But we're getting a much clearer picture now of the level of involvement of the monarchs in some of the issues recorded in these registers. So for some, that might seem like sort of obvious. Like, of course, like there were officials who were just operating as bureaucrats and the king didn't literally write or compose every single document if we've got a big pile of thousands of documents. Okay, but exactly how did it operate? And how do we know when the monarch is involved and when the monarch is not involved? Getting an answer to that question in detail is not so easy and it's not so obvious. And so I'm feeling a sense of accomplishment because at the beginning of this project, it was very difficult for me to get that picture clear in my head. And now it's becoming very clear. And it's because of the work of previous scholars. Like I was able to get my hands on this book that is actually from the University of Arizona's library, and I have through interlibrary loan. It's the one by Trenx, Cerdagne, and Aragon. And the title is Las Cancillerías de la Corona de Aragon y Mallorca desde Jaime I a la muerte de Juan II. So I have this book. It's been very revelatory. I had spent some time trying to find books like this that would give me some of the granular information, but they were really lacking. And so I don't know. I can't quite remember how I found out about this one, but it was in a footnote to something else that I had gotten to just recently. So this was not a book that I had on my radar before this year. but I've been curious about this for so long, and now this project has given me a way to really focus in on it. So I'm feeling accomplished at getting this greater understanding of how the chancery operated. Now let's move on to the content of the letter itself. And that is also pretty interesting because it's about a pirate. Woohoo! We get back to some piracy. So this particular pirate is named at the end of line 3 and going into line 4. So you can see in the image that the edge of the page is kind of tucked into the binding a little bit, but we can still make out pretty much every word there. And the end of line 3 is Bartolomeo, and then line 4 begins with, oh my gosh, I just noticed this. It's an abbreviation that begins that word. I had been thinking that it was P-I-C-H as the last name until just now. And it's actually Perich, P-E-R-I-C-H, Bartolomeo Perich. And I did some research. Okay, I gotta stop saying that when it's the LLM. I had ChatGPT do some research for this name to see if there was any scholarship on it, and I wonder if it would have found Perich, even though I asked it to do a search for a Bartolomeo P-I-C-H. My goodness, it's amazing how, all of the abbreviation marks for the word right below it, which is a difficult word, by the way, because it's something like quoder plurimos, or, I'm not even quite sure what the first half of that word is. But anyway, all the abbreviation marking from the word below kind of made my eye miss the PER abbreviation for the first word on line 4. So the surname of this person is Bartolomeo Perich. All right, this person is a pirate. The word that is used is pirata, and so that's a fine Latin word to use, even though it's been transferred into subsequent Romance languages and into English as pirate. So we know we're talking about a pirate here. And this pirate has been captured. So basically the officials of Perpignan, and I think that's who's specifically being addressed here, even though there's a gigantic number of people who are included in the addressee information in the first 2 lines. But I think it is the officials in Perpignan who have this pirate, Bartolomeo Perich, in jail. And the Latin phrase in line 4 that leads me to that conclusion is tenetis vostris carceribus mancipatum. All right, so basically mancipatum threw me through a loop because it sounds like emancipated. But if you go to a Latin dictionary, and I'm using the online one, Whitaker's Words, mancipatum could mean something like surrendered into, and then carceribus would be like imprisonment or in jail. Like it's got the English cognate like incarcerated. So what this is saying is you all have tenetis in your prison having been surrendered. Mancipatum is like a participle, or it could be something like a supine accusative. And so the grammatical dimensions of this is very much kind of over my head. But I can tell you for sure that the overall sense is quite clear, which is that the officials in Perpignan have this pirate in jail. And then the key phrase that tells us what the vice-chancellor wants to be done is on the next page, folio 132R, and it's in line 3, where we have the phrase custodia transmitatis, transfer custody. So what's being ordered here by the vice-chancellor is for the officials in Perpignan to arrange the transport of this imprisoned pirate to Barcelona. And in Barcelona, he will be punished. He will meet justice. So that's that's what's happening in this document. The arrangement of the transfer of a caught pirate, an imprisoned pirate. Okay. In line 2, we have a word that is a troublesome word for me now, because kind of toward the end of the line, we have this phrase, pirata et eius maleficiis. Maleficiis. Okay, that is a word that we encountered in a letter from Violante, in which she is describing what one of the, in her view, wicked advisors to Sibylla de Fortia had done. And Josep Roca, the historian from the 1920s who wrote that book about Joan and basically transcribed a bunch of documents and put them together thematically, Roca, for that letter by Violante, had interpreted maleficiis as curses or evil sorcery, had really seen that word as having a connotation with magic or the sidereal. And it's very clear from Roca's description and paragraph in which he's talking about that document that that's the sense of that word, because in that document there's no other word that could be used for sorcery or curses. But in this document today, we've got the word maleficiis that is being used in a way that it just does not seem like it's involving magic. It seems that it's like the word malfeasance, misbehavior, bad deeds. And so now I'm a little bit worried that Roca might have overinterpreted that word in the letter from Violante. Although in a later letter from Violante, which we'll be looking at in about a week, she definitely is going all in with the sorcery. So it's not the word maleficiis, it's the word sortilegis, and there's another one that she uses that's definitely like evil curses were put on Joan. So maybe this word maleficiis can be used for both bad deeds, like what this pirate was doing in this document today, and then also like sorcery or curses as Roca interpreted it in the earlier letter from Violante. But we're just going to want to keep a very close watch for when this word maleficiis comes up and try to really pin it down in its meaning when we encounter it. All right. Before we end today's episode, I just want to touch base about AI, large language models, and what is happening. So, we have had some upgrades from both Anthropic and OpenAI. So, Claude is now using model 4.7, Opus 4.7, and ChatGPT is now on version 5.5. And so we're getting a kind of additional level of effort coming from the models, where both the ChatGPT and Claude responses today had these tables in them that were like hyper detailed. It's really like a step up in terms of, trying to provide information and scholarly information to the same exact level of prompting that I was doing before. But I did want to mention something kind of cool that ChatGPT did, which is that it gave me some search results from particular articles. So it didn't just say that it found this article, but it said that it had done a full text search of it. And that's kind of another level. It's almost like it's volunteering to do a little bit of like AI agenting. And I'm not sure how effective that full text searching capability is, but it broke it down in a way that was way more careful than what it would previously do. Because in previous versions, ChatGPT would just kind of list out some sources, and here, you can go check these sources. But in this latest version, today's response was stating, I have done a full text search of these PDFs that are available online that are scholarly. And so I can say that I'm noticing that there's more detail coming through when I ask ChatGPT and Claude to carry out research tasks. Now, how high of a quality is that? I mean, that's still an open question. I have not thoroughly investigated, but I did just want to note that as we get into May of 2026, you can see how the responses from the large language model chatbots are improving compared to the kind of stuff that you would get earlier this year or into last year. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt cara compagnona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I have done my job. Because remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Like, I'm feeling dissatisfied because I want to know more about this Bartolomeo Perich. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes, and listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.